The richest country in the world, they're digging mass graves for those who can't afford a funeral and for those who died of coronavirus with no next of kin. This is Hart Island, just off the Bronx in New York City. Nearly 8,000 people have died in this state alone, and they're struggling to deal with all the burials.
All right, today is Saturday, April 11th. Total coronavirus cases in the world, 1.7 million. 108,000 deaths. In the United States, 528,000 cases. We have now surpassed 20,000 deaths totally in the United States. Although yesterday, April 10th, we did have a record at 2,035 deaths, we have been relatively stable for the last 4 days. So potentially that's a good sign, but of course we've seen breakouts from there. Now, the other chart, if you look at daily new cases, I mean, we've pretty much flattened. It's still a ton of cases. In the United States, we have over 30,000 new cases discovered per day, which is pretty crazy, but it could be worse.
Yeah, I've pulled up Singapore just because I was curious to know what's going on there. Maybe you want to pull up South Korea. But if I look at Singapore, for the last week or two, they've been having 60, 70, 35 new cases. Well, on the 9th, if I can get this, the 9th, they had 287 cases. And on the 10th, April 10th, which is yesterday, 198 cases. So although it's not many cases, if you look at the chart, it seems like Singapore is growing a lot more than where they were in the past.
Well, I have not seen any detailed videos about this, but I have been reading headlines all over the internet about how it is starting to
make a second wave?
Yeah, I don't know if it's technically a second wave, but as people start to loosen their lockdowns in their countries, it's starting to take off again. And I believe Japan was always a country that seemed to have things pretty under control. And then just recently in the last few days, they've had to go even further to lock things down because it was starting to...
Have you read these articles that people, friends of ours from California, are sending us that are suggesting... here's a headline. They're suggesting that the cases of coronavirus in California might have been much larger significantly earlier than when they are predicting it to have hit. Mm-hmm. I think this article talks about like October?
Oh, really?
November? One of them is new signs suggest coronavirus was known in California far earlier than anyone knew. That's from the LA Times. Californians may have developed some herd immunity to coronavirus last year. Stanford team theorizes.
This is really interesting. And after I read one of these articles today, I'm starting to think maybe I had this in December.
Because you got extremely sick.
That was one of the worst illnesses I have ever had.
It was right after Christmas or right before New Year's?
It was during New Year's because I didn't go out for New Year's because I was too sick.
You were extremely sick.
Yeah.
You had a flu.
I assume. But I mean,
do you remember your symptoms?
I do. I remember things very vividly because they seemed so strange to me and so heavy. Katie and I went out to dinner and I felt fine, 100% fine. And as we're eating, I'm like, Katie, I can't remember if it might have been like one arm or one leg. I was like, my right leg is starting to ache. And she was like, what does that mean? And I was like, you know how your body aches when you're sick? I'm like, that is how just my leg feels right now. Take a few more bites of food and I'm like, it is now both of my legs. Keep eating for a few more minutes. Now my body aches. And then a few more minutes later, my arms ache. My entire body is now aching. It came on so fast.
I remember you coming back, and maybe we were trying to plan New Year's, and I was like, hey, do you want to go in on this and buy tickets for whatever we wound up doing? And I remember not even seeing you, and maybe Katie said something like, oh, Lee got extremely sick at dinner. And I was like, whoa, that's really quick. I don't think I saw you for the next 3 days.
But extremely sick usually means
vomiting
or diarrhea or something. It wasn't that at all. It was like, I feel like I'm in the middle of a flu, and it came over me as I was sitting here in just a few minutes. And then had a fever, crazy chills and hot flashes and stuff. I'm just like
you hallucinating?
shaking.
Did you see any family members or anything?
I don't recall hallucinating, but I obviously had that horrific cough for weeks.
Did you have the cough during that period though? Because I remember we went to the for the ski trip a few days later. You'd gotten better. It felt like.
Yeah.
Do you remember how many days that was? It was like 3 or 4 days.
I don't.
I mean, you were in a bedroom for days.
Yeah.
And then we flew to Colorado. And then as we drive up the mountains and everything, you know, you start to get the altitude sickness and you start to have the dry air and you want the humidifiers in your room to give you more water and everything. I remember being in a room right next to you and Katie, and every time I walked out of the room at all hours of the night, you and Katie were like coughing up lungs
Yeah.
for the longest time. And I just remember being like, what in the world do you guys have? And I remember weeks ago in one of our first episodes, I think you said, I don't know, I don't think I had that coronavirus.
Yeah.
But now, are you starting to suspect
Well,
that
you know,
maybe...
there's just been some things that have come out recently. I've heard a lot of people who have actually tested positive for it say that they had symptoms that were very different than the dry cough,
the fever.
What else do people say?
Diarrhea.
You say that. Yeah, some people have that. I don't think I had diarrhea.
Body aches.
Yeah, so I had
Stomach
that,
cramping,
but you know,
maybe nausea. That's another one.
I did not have a dry cough. Like I definitely had a stuffy
Headaches
nose.
a big one.
Yeah, I don't really ever get headaches, so I don't know that would have happened to me. If I did have headaches, I would have remembered it because I never get headaches.
Where did you go before? Where were you at Christmas? Where were you like that most of December? Because you weren't here in Puerto Rico.
I guess I flew in from San Juan to Atlanta before Christmas, and I would imagine if I did get it, I got it on an airplane or an airport. That would make sense. And then we drove around South Carolina and saw family and stuff. I would imagine I didn't have it then, or didn't get it then.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious because one of the doctors in our neighborhood says that he has tests now, the blood tests.
Right.
And
the antibody tests, and I told him I wanted 10 of them because
Yeah.
I was going to mail one to Pi because Pi thinks he and his family got sick back in January. I was going to send one to Mike Kelly because he said he got extremely sick in Switzerland, and he was on the edge near Italy, Austria,
I think
that
Switzerland
area.
was really bad.
And so I was curious to send them some tests, and then I wanted to keep some for ourselves. But now, because these tests are so back-ordered, the doctor only got 100, which means everyone that ordered 10 now get 3.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to see if there's any left over and I could buy some extra ones, or if you have got none, you should tell him like, hey, can I get 1 or 2 of them? Because I'd love for you to get tested. I'd love for Pi to get tested. I'm so curious to know if you guys have the antibodies.
Well, that's the thing. I feel like should a test be wasted on you? You were never sick.
No, I'm not. I don't feel like I really need to take the test, even if I have one.
Yeah.
But considering how sick you were at New Year's, it would be really interesting to know if maybe that's what you had. And so I was talking to some of our friends that were sending these articles to us, and this part of the article, I'll just read it here. When you calculate as well, there were many people on direct flights from San Francisco to LAX to Wuhan, ground zero of the outbreak. You'd be naive to not think that California's population wasn't exposed. So right now the narrative is there was the cruise ship, and a lot of those people went to Seattle, Washington State. There was the first outbreak there. But now ground zero is New York City, right? But when they look at the strains, I've seen some people doing DNA tests, and they're saying that it looks like New York wasn't hit by China, but it may have come from Europe. And I can't remember if it's one of these 2 articles. I'll put them in the description below so you can read them. It may have even been a 3rd article. But it's looking like the virus came from Germany or from Europe into New York. But it is kind of crazy. If you've ever been on the West Coast, you know there's a huge Asian community over there. I mean, if you go to Hawaii, if you go to LA, you go to San Francisco, you go to Seattle, there's a lot of Asian tourists that come to the West Coast of the United States. So it does seem very strange that California isn't getting hit as hard as, say, New York City, because you would think LA would be the second ground zero. But I don't know. I guess I could look these up in a minute. The news isn't portraying that picture. They're not talking about LA getting hit as bad. In fact, 2 days ago, I think we were saying LA was sending the ventilators to New York because they didn't need them at the moment, right? A lot of ventilators were coming from California. So what this could mean, and this is not conspiracy. This is just playing with these articles that are coming from legitimate sources.
Yeah.
Is I guess you could look at it several different ways. You could look at it as, did people get infected months and months ago, maybe in November and December, and a lot of Californians are already sick and got over it and have this herd immunity? And if so, what does that say about our healthcare? That like we weren't able to notice all these people coming up with this weird sense of pneumonia and people were dying?
I bet it just looks like flu symptoms.
But then how did somewhere like China say, wait a minute, this isn't the flu? People don't go on respirators with the flu. That's not something that you're dying from coronavirus in a very different way than people die from the flu.
Is that true? I thought the flu gave people pneumonia or
it does,
bronchitis.
But like this is like everyone's dying from the lung thing. There are some other deaths from like liver failure and heart failure and stuff, but like there seems to be a very clear pathway on how coronavirus is killing people, where the flu, it feels like, the flu kills a lot of young kids, like children. This doesn't kill that. Doesn't kill people within that age range. So it just feels like you would notice these trends, right?
Yeah.
And from my understanding of what happened in Wuhan, doctors were writing down and putting in their databases, and they started to see like, oh, wow, a lot of people are dying from this really weird thing that they shouldn't be dying from. And that's what caused the alarm. So if it was in America earlier, we didn't catch it, which is kind of scary to think that like the same warning signs aren't getting caught in America that they were getting caught in China, right? The second thing is, and maybe this is a little more conspiracy, is that if all these people in America were getting it and getting over it and it's really not that big of a deal, then how do you make sense of all these people dying in New York when they didn't all seem to die in California? And maybe if they were all dying in California and we were just marking it down as the flu, is there a chance that it's definitely more deadly than the flu, but is there a chance that like the media just kind of picked up on it much later in the cycle and has caused everyone to be fearful when a lot of people in California have gotten sick and gotten over it, and now they have this, they have antibodies in their blood and everything. They're not getting sick now. Like, you see what I'm trying to say? I'm probably not articulating this very well.
Yeah, I do see what you're saying. I mean, obviously we can look at the numbers coming out of New York right now, and they're so bad. I mean, the fact that they have like refrigerated trucks for the bodies and they have overflow hospitals and stuff, obviously it's really bad. But I've been thinking about that a lot, you know. If I did have this virus, I am so thankful I had it before the media freaked me out and I would have been laying in bed alone thinking that I was about to die, when in reality I was just like, man, this sucks. What movie should I watch next, you know? But if I caught it today, I wouldn't be able to rest. I would just be thinking, you know, oh my gosh, I have a 2 or 3% chance of dying in the next few days, which would make things a little bit worse.
So unfortunately, I can't go to the Worldometer's website and click on states and see the same charts that you can see for countries. But if we look at California, they are about the 6th state that's been affected. Total deaths for California is 598, compared to New Jersey, which is 2,100, which I understand is right next to Manhattan. New York, 8,000. Michigan, which is Chicago, that's 1,300. Massachusetts, which is probably Boston, 686. It just doesn't seem a little strange that if you said that it came from New York and then it had to get all the way to California, that would make sense.
Nobody's, I mean, the most dense coronavirus spreading area on the planet that I could imagine is a subway.
Yeah.
Even more than an airplane. I mean, at least on an airplane, everybody's got their own seat.
And you're not touching, like in a subway,
Yeah.
You're grabbing that bar. Although, a lot of airports, what does what does LAX have? I'm trying to think of LAX's airport. They have a shuttle? I don't know that they do.
Maybe.
I mean,
yeah, I could see that being really bad.
Atlanta's the largest airport in the world, and you got to get on that train and hold that.
That's where I went.
Atlanta's very far down here. They're saying, Georgia's about to hit an outbreak. But again, with the airport being the largest airport in the world, I would suspect that Atlanta would be one of the largest hotspots right behind New York. I mean, New York's got 3 or 4 airports to split up the travel, where Atlanta, everyone connects. Every time we come to Charleston, not every time, but 50% of the time we have to go through Atlanta.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It's just interesting to start reading these articles and it feels unlikely that the same thing that's happening in New York could have possibly already happened in LA. But maybe if you spread it out over a large period of time and the majority of people get over it. But it just makes me think, if that many people could have it in America, then that means the death rate is so small. If we're talking about enough people have it to where most Californians are not getting sick, then that means millions of people have it and we're fine, which pulls that death rate down a whole lot,
Yeah.
But I mean, like Pi said, you kind of have to look at these numbers much later in time because every country, every state, they have their own numbers. And overall, the consensus does seem to be that this thing has a 2 to 5% death rate, which is crazy. You'd expect that to come down because testing hasn't been done, but I don't know. That's been the most interesting thing that I've read in the last 24 hours was this whole thing about, California's numbers. And I have also read articles that say California is quickly increasing and that they suspect the numbers are going to be really, really bad soon. But again, with it being on the other coast and being a major destination, especially for Asia, I would have thought the West Coast would have been hit harder first compared to the East Coast. But
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's easy to think, I've been watching the movie Outbreak on Netflix. I've never seen it before.
You say that as like you've been watching it again and again?
Well,
you watch it
I only watch like 15 minutes every night because I watch it as I'm going to sleep, and then I only get 15 minutes in, I cut it off and go to sleep. But, I think we have in our mind that it reached California on this day, and then it's spreading from that day. But in reality, maybe the first person came on one day, and then that person left and didn't infect anybody, and then they happened to infect 3 people in Atlanta, but then one of those people who was infected in Atlanta went back to California, infected 2 people, and then came back. Like, people are moving around so much that it would be impossible to say, this is the day and this is the person, and it's only going to get worse from here. I could imagine lots of peaks and troughs.
But what's interesting with the genoming is that they are able to see which part of the country is affected by which specific mutations.
Oh, really?
So they can see that they now think that New York was not infected by Asia, but infected by Europe. Because they can tell that the mutations that they see in Europe are the same mutations they're seeing with the majority of people in New York.
Really?
Whereas the people that are infected, say, from the cruise in Seattle, that is a different strain. I mean, it's still, 98% the same, but they have just enough mutation drift to where they can tell, where it came from. I mean, you've seen those charts where it shows everyone flying out and where it's all going. Maybe these charts are changing quite a bit as they're sequencing the DNA more, but they can trace this back pretty well.
I don't see how they can when, it seems like we can't even get enough tests for people who want to be tested. We heard yesterday from Monty that he has 6 friends who are sure they have it and have even been told by doctors they have it, but they're like, hey, we're going to save the test for other people. And so those people are not added to the number.
What do you think is happening with the tests? Do you think that they are really hard to produce and there's such a need for it worldwide that there's just not enough companies that can make the tests? Do you think they're relatively expensive and the governments don't have enough money to buy the test? Doesn't it just seem weird that, surely with all of this going on, they'd be able to make at least enough tests, because there's 3 different types of tests you can get, that you would have enough tests where everyone would have that available?
I don't know. That's a if you said,
maybe
hey, we need a pregnancy test for every human on the planet in 2 weeks, I don't think the pregnancy test companies could make that.
Not necessarily not for everybody, but anyone who thought they were pregnant. Is it that difficult? I mean, I guess the counter argument would be the masks. Masks are probably much easier to make, and there's a shortage of masks too. So you would think that masks would be easier to make and like.
And it also seems like a lot of this testing technology is being made on a daily basis. I keep reading stories about how Germany just came up with a new test that's only 4 minutes rather than 5 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm curious. I mean, we will show you taking a test. Like, I don't know if you're going to take a test or if I'm going to get one of these tests.
I feel like I'd give it to you first because I don't think I haven't been sick in over a year. Like I've had like my throat's a little sore and I've had a headache or I've been nauseous a little bit, but I have not been to where I'm like I am going to sleep off 3 days. That hasn't happened to me in a while.
Well, it all seems too good to be true that somebody in our neighborhood has extra tests right now. These tests are going to be accurate and these tests are going to be relatively affordable. I mean, I remember just a few days, maybe a few weeks ago, it was in this journal series that we were making.
They were like $3,000?
$3,000 a test was the original
now,
price.
Now, that was the one that went up your nose and they had to send off to the lab, right?
Right.
I think these tests have always been less expensive. Maybe they are $100 a test, but we're buying them in bulk through a medical supply company. And they didn't have enough tests. Like, he was supposed to get 200 just for the neighborhood, and he was only able to get 100 because he ordered thousands for his hospitals back in the States. So I feel very lucky that we are able to get them, but the price went from like $20 a test at that bulk rate down to like $10 a test. And when he said they're $10, I was like, give me 10 of them, you know?
Dude, I'd give me 1,000 of them. I just feel like you could find so many people who'd be interested to take them.
But after we heard that the government of Puerto Rico got ripped off by buying all these tests for millions of dollars and it's a scam, and I don't know if they're getting tests that just aren't accurate or if they just totally got ripped off. It does make me worry. But the doctor here said he has corona patients in his hospitals in Texas. He was going to run the tests on them and get back to us on like how efficient they are. But it looked like it was in the 90% range.
Okay.
But I don't know. I'm hearing a lot about false negatives. Like you could take the test, but you really did have coronavirus, but you're showing up negative. If you take the test and it comes back positive, is there false positives as well? Like, we need to read a little bit about these tests.
I don't know. That's why I'm not getting my hopes up that these tests are real or accurate or whatever. It just seems too good to be true that we have $10 tests here when the whole world is looking for these things. But
well, I'm also thinking if you were sick. I mean, Katie clearly had the cough. I don't know if she ever had any of the other stuff, but she had the cough. You guys were coughing like crazy.
I've heard interviews with couples where the guy is on his deathbed and the wife tests positive and she has no symptoms.
Yeah.
So the fact that Katie had some of my symptoms, but for the most part felt fine, falls in line with what a lot of people are saying it's like.
Yeah. Well, nobody else in our house got sick, and we had my parents there. We were there.
I could have killed your parents.
Yeah.
Given it's invisible, without widespread testing, how would you know?
Well, I think that we're going to have it in retreat. Will it be today? No. Tomorrow? No. But it will be at a certain point in the not too distant future. It will be gone.
And how do you do that without the widespread testing? Specifically, my
Oh,
question.
we'll know because people aren't going to go to the hospital. People aren't going to get sick. You're going to know that with that. But we're going to do very substantial testing. We're doing more testing right now than any other country in the world by far. And if you'd like to have that question answered, I'll have the professional answer it. Deborah, perhaps you could come up. We are doing tremendous testing, but you'll know. You're going to know before anybody because you're going to see nobody's getting sick anymore. It will be gone, and it won't be that much longer gone.
Another controversial thing I saw, I don't know, it's a long video clip, but it's interesting. It's the Bill Maher clip.
Scientists, yes, scientists who are generally pretty liberal, have been naming diseases after the places they came from for a very long time. Zika is from the Zika forest. Ebola from the Ebola River. Hantavirus, the Hantan River. There's the West Nile virus and guinea worm and Rocky Mountain spotted fever and, of course, the Spanish flu. Congressman Ted Lieu tweeted, "The virus is not constrained by country or race. Be just as stupid to call it the Milan virus." No, that would be way stupider because it didn't come from Milan. And if it did, I guarantee we'd be calling it the Milan virus.
I completely agree with them. It's so insane. And luckily, I think Trump has backed down from calling it the China flu or China virus, whatever he was calling it, Wuhan virus.
I don't watch Trump very often, so I don't know what he says every day.
There was a time when I was watching him and Cuomo every single day in their entirety, like 2 hours each. I haven't as much anymore. I'm just kind of
And
watching
they were both
the highlights.
bickering at each other. For,
No. It was just always Trump would like cross out coronavirus in his speeches, and he would change it to China virus or Wuhan virus.
Right.
And then every time the reporters would be like, do you think it's acceptable to be calling it the China virus when it affects everyone equally?
Yeah.
I was like, this is so stupid. First of all, I kind of get the vibe that Trump's doing this on purpose.
Yeah.
So like, it's his fault because he's trying to do it. But then the way the reporters are jumping on it, I was kind of rooting for Trump. I'm like, yeah, just keep call it the Kung Flu. Make him really mad.
The Kung Fu virus?
Kung Flu.
Oh, Kung Flu.
Yeah.
Bill Maher is typically very liberal. And here he was saying it should be called the Wuhan virus.
Is, Bill Maher is like the highest level of douchebag, in my opinion. But he seems to remain very consistent. He seems to be intellectual. He seems to have a good argument for everything. He doesn't care about your feelings. He just cares about the facts. And so even though he can be an asshole the majority of the time, I feel like most of the points he's trying to make are very reasonable if you can get past his douchebaggery.
Wanda Las Pueblas is trending, which means there's something going on in Puerto Rico. It's never good when on Twitter you see the biohazard symbol over the Puerto Rican state.
Yeah, so I think maybe 2 videos ago I told you that the police were releasing information that they were going to start coming into our community and stop people from walking around and stuff. And so maybe yesterday, I guess it was yesterday, I went out with Katie to bike ride. And we've got some secret places that we go on bike ride, but we have to drive our bikes to this location. And there were cops everywhere in our neighborhood. And it was really weird because Puerto Rico has really bad crime numbers. And I just kept thinking, where are these cops on regular days? Why are they going after walkers and joggers?
Yeah.
But yet we have like murders and rapists all over the place in Puerto Rico. It just seems weird. And then they're coming in.
And you got to be careful because we have Puerto Ricans that watch this channel.
Sure.
It's not all over, but per capita,
Yeah,
the crime
it's the
rate
highest
here is
number.
the highest rate of any state,
Yeah.
if it were a state.
Yeah.
But-
And so it's just weird that, like, nobody follows traffic laws here. You'll be driving and you'll be stopped at a red light, and the guy next to you is literally drinking a beer, like, in the car. I've seen this multiple times. Yeah. Then he will just drive through the red light because nobody's coming. No one cares.
Fumes are coming out of the car. Yeah, we have to have the inspection every
the
every
bumpers are falling off all the cars. Like, all that's fine.
Yeah.
But these joggers, we got to catch them. And there were cops everywhere. I just didn't know there were that many cops in Humacao. But we did get away with our sneaky bike ride because we drove to a place where cops couldn't get us.
So apparently our governor is saying that there will be a new announcement, but nobody knows what it is yet. I don't know why there's all these crazy graphics with the biohazard symbols everywhere, but I guess I would suspect that there's going to be a new curfew. It's going to get tighter or it's going to be extended. I hope it's not tighter because it ends at 7, which is daylight still. So a lot of times it's the sun's setting and I'm thinking, I should order food and go get it.
Like, how much tighter can they get? We can only go outside 3 days a week if we have the right license plate on our car. If you don't own a car, you're screwed. Like, if you had to bike to the grocery store, you're screwed. That's illegal now.
So this guy on Twitter he's the guy who's always interviewing everybody. He's been in many of our clips. He's the guy who was interviewing the medical person who bought all of the tests. He is saying that Puerto Rico has done 8,000 tests so far in 5 weeks for an island of 3.4 million people. He's saying that is ridiculously low.
Yeah.
So we really, Puerto Rico is at the very bottom or close to the bottom. There might be a few states that have lower numbers than we do, but it sounds like perhaps it's just because we haven't tested at all.
Well, we had somebody in our neighborhood who seemed to have it, at least people thought they did, and they went and they did like chest scans and then didn't give them a test. I don't know why, if they didn't have a test or they didn't want to do a test. I know somebody commented that a chest scan is just as good as a COVID test. I don't know how that's true. If many people don't have symptoms, how is a chest scan good if, you know, a woman has it and doesn't even have symptoms? That doesn't seem true, but who knows?
Do you want to talk a little bit about the UFC? Did we talk about that?
Oh, yeah.
I can't even remember what all we've talked about in the last few days.
Yeah, so I think yesterday with Monty, we didn't really talk about the news much at all, but April 18th was supposed to be the new UFC fight. It was supposed to be Tony versus Khabib, one of the biggest fights of all time. That fell out because Khabib got trapped in Russia or something. But then Dana White says he's got a secret location and he's putting on this event, and it was actually a pretty decent card. Dana White comes out a day or two later and says he got word from the highest people at Disney and ESPN that they didn't want him to do it.
249 has been canceled. All UFC events postponed indefinitely due to COVID-19. Dana White says he's ready to promote the event, but things were taken out of his control. Much more to come.
The government stepped in and said, you ain't doing shit. Wow.
I heard some other rumor from someone that said it was the governor of California that convinced him not to do it. I'm not sure what's true.
So his place that he found was in California.
Yeah, it's an Indian reservation in California, and he has sworn that the first UFC event, once they're allowed to do them, will be at this Indian reservation. I don't know if it'll be with a crowd or not, but he says...
Do they have the facilities to hold that many people?
Well, I think maybe that's the whole point, is that he assumes that the first UFC event will not have a crowd, so it doesn't matter.
Oh.
You just have to have an empty room.
Interesting. Because it felt like he was definitely stepping around different laws and stuff to try to find a place that, I guess he's got the athletic commission to deal with too.
Yeah.
On top of, is the state on lockdown? Like there's all these like angles, you know? And like Monty said yesterday, a lot of people are concerned that if you put on an event, are you responsible with people getting sick? Which is kind of messed up the way I think about it, you know? Like you should take responsibility, and if you're a fighter and you're willing to get in a ring with somebody else, like it's not the promoter who should be at fault, but you know how litigation,
you know the risks.
You know how litigation is here in America, you know.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you know, if your governor doesn't say to shut down and then you go to the beaches of Florida and you get sick, in a weird twisted way, Americans will find a way to sue the governor because he didn't warn them correctly, you know. So there's all this weird bureaucracy that you have to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really bummed out about this. I really appreciated that someone in the public eye like Dana White wasn't freaking out. He wanted to get back to work. He wanted to pay these fighters. He wanted to entertain us all. And, you know, there's a lot of people trying to stop him from doing this, but it seemed like nobody's stopping him. He's going to make this happen.
This young woman is so scared she wants to remain anonymous. She says police beat her up with sticks after finding her walking along the sidewalk. The police say harsh tactics are needed in the townships.
If they don't listen, then unfortunately those things happen. I'm not saying it's right. And in some communities, that's all the members of the public understand. They need to see those things, unfortunately, before they adhere to instructions, yes. They need to see that this is serious and the police are not just telling you to go in the house because, you know, it's a willy-nilly instruction.
Police are out in force in Kenya too. Here, they sometimes use tear gas to keep people inside. The capital, Nairobi, is under lockdown. No one is allowed to leave or enter the city, leaving some stranded.
Have you been reading the comments on the 3 journals that we've done where we've had guests? You read a lot of the comments, right?
Yeah, well, the last video had a lot of comments about your attire.
Yeah, they didn't like my shorts.
No one.
I thought I misunderstood. I thought somebody said they wanted me to wear shorter shorts, so I did that.
Oh.
And then
they want them shorter.
Well, I thought somebody said I wore some shorts that were up to here, and they said something like, "I really wish Patrick could find some shorts that were even shorter." And I was like, "Well, I have those. They're swim trunks.
Nice.
I got from H&M, and so I wore those yesterday, and apparently everyone was in a fit."
Well, so if you guys want to see Patrick's shorts get even shorter.
I wore some interesting pants today, which maybe we'll talk about in a minute. But
Well, it looks like you're wearing your girlfriend's clothing. That's what it looks like.
yeah, these are just purple pants. Everyone's got some purple pants, right?
Those red shorts from yesterday didn't look like men's clothing.
Yeah, they're like, when you got a bod like me, you can wear the skimpier swim trunks.
Just because you can
Doesn't mean-
physically put them on doesn't mean
Well,
you should.
back to my original question. I've really enjoyed having some photographers on the channel.
Right.
And I enjoy hearing other people's perspectives. We had Mike Kelly, who unfortunately wasn't in LA. I kind of wanted to see his perspective living downtown Los Angeles, but he had bailed on his city and had gone to Hilton Head, where he's
coward.
Hilton Head, where he's now like driving golf balls off his mom's backyard, And then we had Pi, who's close to LA. He's in Orange County.
Pi was overwhelmingly positive. The comments were overwhelmingly positive. I felt like Monty's were fairly positive. Mike Kelly's was overwhelmingly negative. Most people said that he ruined the episode and potentially the entire series.
Yeah.
People said they'll never come back. Monty, I think people said they liked it. I didn't watch your entire edit, but it looked like you didn't cut anything out. I thought a lot of what we talked about with Monty should have been cut for time, and like his daughter jumping on the bed in the background. But then a lot of people were like, I loved seeing the daughter and the cat. So he's always
it seems like people are on two different, sides. They either like the variety and like us to get back to some photography, but then others, I think, they just like to hear me and you argue. And we definitely argue more in this format, where it's kind of hard to interrupt somebody who's being piped in, and you don't really want to argue with your guests a whole lot.
That's true.
Sometimes I think we argue just to argue and have entertainment, but...
Well, I think people's favorite thing seems to be when you have some idiotic conspiracy theory and then I shut it down and make you look dumb. That's people's favorite thing.
But one of my favorite things is to not really believe the conspiracy, but just throw it out there and play devil's advocate so that we have something to talk about.
Oh,
but then everybody's like, Patrick, why are those hospitals not empty? And I'm like, I don't really care. Like,
have you seen the comments of people trying to guess our political leanings? And people are like, it's very obvious that...
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
And a lot of people are like, it's very obvious that Patrick is a leftist or incredibly left-leaning. I'm like, what? How do you get that at all from
Or they think you're a Trump supporter because you say nice things about Trump. You're like, Trump, really? I don't think Trump's doing that bad of a job. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, might as well put the magma hat on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to reveal something right now that I probably shouldn't reveal.
Uh-oh, don't reveal it.
But I think the reason why you guys will never be able to figure out my political position is because I don't feel like I have a very strong political leaning. I see both sides of so many arguments.
But at the end of the day, you have to pick the side.
To vote?
I mean, eventually, like, you feel like one side has a lead on the other,
For some very specific things, yes. Like, I see both sides, but I lean a particular way. But when somebody's like, Trump is doing a horrific job with the coronavirus, I can't just say,
Easy.
I agree. I want to say...
Easy.
Careful. I want to say, oh, what do you mean by that? And then when they say things like, well, he should have stopped all travel to the United States or whatever, I'm like, no president would have done that, so
That's
I
what's
can't agree
interesting
with
about
that.
Trump is so many people who hate Trump, they say he should have shut down the country months ago, but then at the same time, they're like, Trump's a dictator who's going to shut down the country and take all of our freedoms away. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're kind of saying two different things here. Like, if you're really worried about Trump being Hitler, shouldn't you want the guns so that when he comes for you, you can fight against him? But it's, I don't know, people take these like sides that don't always add up. And I'm like...
Yeah. And I've got a buddy who has... Later in life, I think it's because of the woman he married, but he went from being extremely conservative to ultra liberal in just a few years.
Yeah.
And he'll come up to me and just be like, Lee, man, we got to have gun control in this country. And I just am like, I don't really feel that strongly about that. I feel like there's other issues going on. If I had to put my energy to something, I don't really care to have a gun, but knowing that my neighbor has a gun does not scare me. And it didn't used to scare him, but now it terrifies him.
Yeah.
I can't sleep at night knowing that my neighbor's got a gun, and I'm just like, who cares? So for that reason, no one's going to be able to figure out my political leaning because I don't even know where I stand.
Are you voting Jill Stein?
Honestly, I don't even know who that is.
No, well, that would have been interesting. She's back in the game. I see her trending now.
Really?
She's telling Bernie supporters, like, if you want to support the Green Party, come back to me.
And what is the Green Party? What are their policies?
I'm not exactly sure. I don't know what the Green policy is, their platform, but I know that they're a Russian puppet because she has pictures with Putin. So she now is part of. So is Gabbard, Tulsi Gabbard. She's like the
Hawaiian girl,
governor of Hawaii. Maybe she never dropped out, and like she too. But she's a Democrat, but she says like really conservative things that make Democrats hate her.
See, I don't know anything about her, but every time I've heard her speak, I'm like, she sounds smart, and she sounds like she's speaking off the cuff, and it's not pre-written and scripted like the majority of people. I feel like they're scripted. Trump, never scripted. Never scripted, but what he says is insane, and I can't believe it's coming out of a president's mouth, but it is honest. It's never scripted. One thing that I said in yesterday's video that I was going to look into, and I haven't had a lot of time to look into it, was with this mortgage forgiveness or, rent forgiveness, all this stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
Are they actually forgiving this, or are they just pushing the payments to the end?
Yeah.
I have read some things about some companies saying, no, you must pay, like at the end of 90 days, you owe all 3 months of mortgage payments, which kind of makes the whole thing pointless. And then someone in the comments mentioned that their payment is now $45 more for the remainder of their mortgage.
To cover those months.
So that their mortgage payoff date will be the exact same date. But they're basically spreading out. Instead of adding on monthly payments to the end, they are raising the cost of each month's payments. So I'm hearing a few different things. I don't know if you've heard anything about this.
No, I mean, I still don't know that I've heard anyone getting any of the stimulus money yet. And I don't know that any of our readers who are in America have posted this either. Has anyone, like people have applied for the different benefits, but it's just been like accepted but not like guaranteed.
Yeah, and I remember, there was something in the bill that said we were supposed to get paid within 3 days. That obviously didn't happen.
I am hearing that the $1,200 that many Americans will be getting will be direct deposited into their bank account that's associated with the IRS.
Yep.
And I heard that was supposed to happen like in the next 3 days. So that would be this beginning of this next week. But again, that seems like one of the easiest payments that should go out. The IRS has probably 50% of taxpayers probably pay with an electronic invoice, or bill, check. And you would think that that would be the easiest one to just give that. If you made less than the amount of money, you're just going to get this amount. It's like an equation. But that still hasn't come out. And I mean, we're now weeks after this. So all the people that need money because they've been unemployed now for 3-4 weeks haven't gotten anything, unless I guess you've gone through the unemployment route.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I think I just heard something too that they just came up with another bill for $250 billion for individuals or small businesses or something. We'll have more information about that in the next few days. One little bit of good news. I did hear somewhere that either today or tomorrow the government is creating a website that you can go to and put in your bank account information if your bank account information changed or was not on your last tax return. So that's going to make it a little bit easier to get the $1,200 bucks.
Well,
or whatever.
I know Kristen canceled the bank account that she had associated with her tax returns last year. So she's been worried that like they're going to have to mail it to me, and I don't know what address. Like, she doesn't live in Boston, and maybe that address is still on there and stuff. So that's good news that you can just go there and add a bank account.
Breaking news today on the coronavirus pandemic, with more than 19,000 people now having died here in the United States from COVID-19. That death toll higher than any other country. In fact, it has just surpassed Italy. The number of confirmed cases in the United States now almost 500,000. You see the numbers there. A temporary medical care facility now open in Detroit as that state's case count nears 23,000. It was built inside a convention center. It'll house up to 970 beds. Meanwhile, the state's governor, Gretchen Whitmer, has put in place tighter restrictions on residents. Starting today, travel between two residents is not permitted.
Some people in my investing group, I don't know if I really have an opinion on this yet, maybe you do, but they were just talking about like the moral, how do I phrase this? Is it immoral for the government to start picking and choosing who they want to give money to? And the idea is that if you owned a bunch of stock and then suddenly that company decided to dilute the stock by just making up more stock positions and giving them to people or letting other people buy them and driving the price down, is that fair? Or if you were just given money because you made below that amount, or if you were, the big one is student debt. If they just are going to like give you money to like forgive your debt, you know, this whole forgiveness of money thing. If you're going to get your debt, your student loans forgiven, there's got to be a line where that's drawn. Maybe it could be a soft line where it's phased out over a period of time. But if you graduated college in 1990 or you graduated college in 2020, you know, some people are going to get that benefit where some don't.
Well, I do not like incentivizing people to be irresponsible with money.
That was a big part of this argument is, you know, a lot of people took on greater risk where there's greater reward. But if you don't have the ability to fail when you take those leaps of faith with high risk, then isn't it really wrong to reward those people the same way that you would reward somebody who didn't take any risk? You know what I mean? Like if you didn't go to college, you're not getting the benefit of the debt forgiveness because you didn't go and take on that loan.
Yeah.
And then fail at your job paying back the loan because you got a better education.
Yeah, I in terms of the student forgiveness, I am completely against that. I feel like that is the definition of unfair, and there are people who would have gone to college but didn't because they needed to be better with their money. There are people who change their entire lives to be able to pay off their loans in a reasonable amount of time, while everyone else borrowed more money, squandered, you know, their working life, and, you know, bought new cars or a house they couldn't afford or went on vacations and then just kept this debt and now we're going to pay it off. I don't like that at all. The stimulus money of the $1,200, we're not going to be able to get that because we make too much money. I feel like that's fine because the $1,200 is not making anyone rich. Like, we're just trying to keep everyone's lights on during this hopefully short amount of time, and we're going to get out of this.
But they were talking about the Fed, and there's this idea that the Fed is going to start buying stocks and start buying junk bonds and like all of these other things to keep these industries afloat. And it's the same idea with the banks 10 years ago. It's the same idea with the airports, you know, the airlines now. It's this idea that like we can pick and choose which industries, small business or huge business, to bail out when they failed to run their business. And it just starts to feel really sketchy when you're saying like, we're going to give money to, we're going to pick and choose who to give money to, because there's going to be winners and there's going to be losers, when maybe the true capitalistic approach would just be everyone that fails. And if you have a restaurant that can't support itself in this situation, that sounds very mean and unfair, but it's kind of the definition of fair. Is if everybody isn't able to like work their way through this, then there's going to be repercussions.
Well, there was a viral video that came out in the last day or two of this guy on MSNBC or something, and he basically said we should let the airlines fail.
Are you arguing to let airlines, for example, fail?
Yes.
Why? I mean, How does that make sense in the broader scheme of the economy?
When a company fails, it does not fire their employees. It goes through a packaged bankruptcy, right? If anything, what happens is the people who have the pensions inside those companies, the employees of these companies, end up owning more of the company.
So why does anybody deserve, using your word, to get wiped out from a crisis created like this? How does anybody deserve to get wiped out?
Well, but just be clear, like, who are we talking about? We're talking about a hedge fund that serves a bunch of billionaire family offices? Who cares? Let them get wiped out. Who cares?
Now, I don't know if what he's saying is true. If it is true, then sure. You know, like you said, all these extremely rich people and companies and everything have taken these risks. They have become wealthy because of the risks that they have taken and the money that they've borrowed. They've borrowed too much, like they were not able to stay afloat in a time like this. What happens to all of us when we can't pay our bills? Like, we don't get bailed out. But I think everyone's fear, it's the same fear that happened in 2008 with the banks, is like, it's not just as simple as, oh, the CEO is not going to get paid $100 million this year. It's not that. It's all of the employees. It's all of the Americans that like flying on Delta flights that are reasonably affordable. And if that all of a sudden shut down and all the people that work for that airline no longer exist anymore, they don't have jobs, and then now airline prices go up 10x or whatever, that's way worse than just keeping them afloat for a few months.
But it's still picking and choosing. It's still, it's like this God in the air who's like deciding who to bless and who not to.
Yeah.
And it's our government, and then we're paying the bill because we're the taxpayers that are supporting this.
It's like a natural disaster. And why does anybody deserve to get wiped out? Wouldn't that be immoral in and of itself?
No, because what's happening right now is what I'll tell you is on Main Street today, people are getting wiped out. And right now, rich CEOs are not, boards that had horrible governance are not, hedge funds are not, people are. 6 million people just this week alone basically saying, holy mackerel, I don't know how I'm going to make my own expenses for the next few weeks, days, months. So it's happening today to individual Americans. And what we've done is disproportionately prop up and protect poor performing CEOs, companies, and boards. And you have to wash these people out.
So we're at an hour. I guess the obvious question, we've covered my pants yesterday. The obvious question is, what is going on with the little shaving that you've done here?
Well, we've just been working on another project in the studio. Tell all the hunters to lay down their guns. Tell them that the tigers need a little bit of love. Well, I saw a tiger, now I understand. I saw a tiger, and a tiger saw me. Tiger, and a tiger saw a man. I saw a tiger, and a tiger saw a man. We have to free Joe Exotic, you guys.